Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April Forum. We've got another great panel lined up for you today. I am Carol Bladen, Director of Marketing and Partnerships for Impact Washington, the NIST MEP affiliate for Washington State. And we've been hosting these forums since mid-2021. Our goal has always been that these forums are a resource among many other that are out there. And we want to build a community that allows us to connect manufacturers, businesses, cybersecurity experts, business development partners, and other community-based resources. Our goal is to establish a dialogue that presents an opportunity for you to ask questions, get answers to your ongoing and current cybersecurity needs that we know constantly change. I encourage you today to ask questions, join us in the chat, build your network, connect with the experts that are on the call with us today, and all the other partners. We are all here to help you succeed. We've got another great topic this morning, creating a culture of compliance. I'm looking forward to that. And before we get started, I'd like to thank our partners at PNDC. You've been great partners for many years, and we truly appreciate your support in helping us host and produce these forums. With that, I would like to pass it over to Denise, who is my partner today in helping facilitate this forum. Again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you very much to Impact Washington. CMMC is a hot topic for members and non-members alike in the defense industrial base as they try to navigate these changing rules and such. I'm coming to you from National Harbor in Maryland from the Sea Air Space Trade Show, and it is a hot topic here as well as the Navy looks to implement some of these CMMC changes. PNDC is the membership trade association for the Pacific Northwest, the defense and security, and we partner with Impact Washington, the only logical partner for this, for these programs, because cybersecurity is an important part of our secure and resilient supply chain here in the Northwest. And actually for many industry sectors outside of the defense industrial base. I do want to call attention, we have at least one representative from Adam Smith's office. We have Samantha, I think it's Shafton, I might have mispronounced that, but I believe that's the case, on our line. And we also have the guru of all things space, Stan Scholl, in the audience. I would encourage you to LinkedIn request a connection to Stan, as if you have a question about space, that's who I would go to. In fact, that is who we go to. As we get started, make sure you use the chat function to ask your questions and such. We're going to try really hard to keep the acronyms to the minimum. If we can, we will put the definitions in and some of the more obscure ones going forward. But you can download your own chat at the end of the program if you want to save some of those definitions and such. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to hear from Jennifer Guerrero from Buchalter. She's an attorney with Buchalter, but even more important, she was an active duty Marine before she earned her bachelor's in science from the Maryland University. So we thank you for your service, Jennifer. After that, we'll go to our panel, which has 4 of the most experienced CMMC folks in our area, in our region. We have some questions set up for them, and we're really excited to get this whole thing started. This program is recorded, so and it will be available on Impact Washington's YouTube channel. And all of the cyber forums are on their YouTube channel. So if you missed one and you want to check in with them, that's a great place to do it. We would encourage you to ask chat questions as you go. Cyber is a very, very important topic. And if I can see where it would be really, really confusing, I know it's confusing to me. And that's what those experts are here for, to help you get on your path. That being said, I want to get right into it and introduce Jen Guerrero. Again, she's an attorney with Buchalter, and she has tons of experience in all aspects of legal issues, including risk mitigation and management, data security, privacy, regulatory and compliance issues, supply chain, and much, much more. Again, she is a former Marine. And without further ado, Jennifer's going to share her slides, which will be available after this webinar. So Jennifer, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you for the very nice introduction, Denise. I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. As Denise was mentioning, the bulk of my practice is in data privacy and cybersecurity, and so it seems very appropriate for me to be talking about this today. Okay, that worked. All right, so Denise already went over my background, so I'm not going to go back into it. So basically, what are we talking about today? So we're talking about cybersecurity, in line with the theme of the culture of compliance. The main things that, any organization dealing with DoD contracts, government contracting should be aware of. There's the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the FAR and the DFAR requirements, NIST 800-171 standards. And as you guys have already been talking about, the CMMC requirement. Today, we're going to be talking more about the bolded portions, which is the FAR requirement, just generally. The DFARs more specifically with the cyber incident reporting requirements. And then we'll briefly touch on the CMMC requirement. So as the audience probably already knows, what is FARs and DFARs? Basically, most of the contracts you guys encounter are going to have these references to FARs or DFARs requirements. You're going to see it in solicitations before you even submit your bid. So what is DFARs? It's a requirement. It's of law, DoD-wide policies. It's more, there's more requirements than the basic FAR requirement. So what is the FAR requirement? Basically, it applies to the contractor information systems. So it's the least, the minimal requirement for cybersecurity is a baseline of 15 security controls. And you have to flow down those contracts to your subcontractors. There's no grace period for implementation for the FAR requirement. It's mandatory at the time of the award. So basically, when you submit your solicitation for the bid, you'll need to be compliant with it at the time when you submit your bid. So basically, here's the 15 requirements. It's more in here for reference. Like I said, they're going to send out this PowerPoint presentation, so I wanted to have that in there for you guys. Okay, so the hot topic, that we're probably going to talk about a lot more in the panel, the CMMC certification that came out, that's going to be rolled out over 5 years in the solicitation and contract requirement. So if your company produces products used by the DoD, you're required to comply with the minimum set of DFARs. So, and which requirements you're going to have to comply with depends on what type of information that you will have. So this doesn't generally apply to commercially available off-the-shelf items. So and that's specifically defined. You can find a list of what that means online. And then if purchases are below the micro purchase threshold, then it also doesn't apply. But generally, everything outside of that, then you will, unless you meet these two exceptions. So DFARS compliance. So all defense contractors who have information systems, you process it, you store it, you retain it, you transmit it. The covered defense information is you will need to comply with the DFAR 252, 204, 712. Basically, there, that's going to house your cyber incident reporting obligations and the requirements for adequate safeguards. All DoD contractors have to comply with the DFARS requirement for adequate security. So generally, these are the main compliance requirements you're going to see that come up in the contracts. Now, there are some other ones that are referenced, but these are the main ones. So in the 7012, like I mentioned, we're going to go into more detail later into this presentation. As I mentioned, the CMMC interim rule, it created the 7019, the 7020, and 721. So basically, the 719, in order to be considered for the award, you're going to need to implement the NIST, has to be the 800 set 171. And you have to submit the assessment. It can't be less than 3 years old. So you can't submit the assessment that was 4 years old, 4 years ago. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going to go into more detail on this, but I just figured, we have to at least mention it during this presentation. But generally, the 2.0 model that came out, it's geared towards the type of information. One thing they did with the changes in the 2.0 was align it more with the NIST standards, which makes it a little bit easier to comply. So you're not scrambling and trying to figure out, how can I comply with this? Now that's more closely aligned with NIST, so it makes it easier, especially for the smaller businesses, to obtain compliance. I mean, compliance in and of itself is already a complicated thing. It can be confusing and difficult to navigate as to what do I need to implement and how far do I need to go to be compliant. And so making that change made it a bit easier for everybody to understand. All right, so here's the meat and potatoes of my presentation today. So we're going to be going over 7012, safeguarding covered defense information and cyber incident reporting. So basically, this clause applies to all covered contractor information systems, which is, a covered contractor information system is an unclassified information system owned or operated by or for a duty contractor, and that processes, stores, or transmit covered defense information. You guys probably already know what covered defense information is, but generally there's 4 types: controlled technical information with military or space application, critical information, which is more operation security, expert controlled information, and then the catch-all, any other information that requires safeguarding or dissemination controls pursuant to laws, regulations, or government-wide policies. Okay. So another reference you might see in a contract is to 7008, which is basically the compliance clause that says the requirements of 7012 must be implemented for all covered defense information, all covered contractor information systems, which are those are the 2 items we just covered, to support the performance of this contract. Requires, like I mentioned, 7012 requires adequate security on all covered contractor information system. And then it also requires cyber incident reporting within 72 hours. So every contractor that takes on a contract with this DFARS is subject to an immediate requirement to provide adequate security for CDI. And in addition, a company that receives a contract subject to the new DFARS must report to the DoD chief information within 30 days of the contract award. That's going to be specified in the 800-171, the NIST standards. So if you didn't meet a security requirement that wasn't implemented at the time of the award, so you need to let them know within 30 days of the contract award. So are these requirements something that you have to flow down to your subs? So yes, these requirements are going to have to be flowed down to any subcontractors that you use to perform the contract. And in substance, it doesn't have to be a verbatim, but it needs to materially cover these requirements. If that subcontractor is going to be involved in using covered defense information, or if they're going to be providing operationally critical support, which would mean, if it's something that they do is critical to your performance under that contract, And then you also need to make sure that in those contracts that you're pushing down the cyber incident reporting requirements. Okay. So cyber incident. What is a cyber incident? I mean, generally, if there's a compromise or an actual potential adverse effect on an information system, that's going to be defined as a cyber incident. Now, one thing that might be helpful when you're doing your contracts with the government is to make sure there's a clear definition of cyber incident and what is not a cyber incident. So sometimes, if there's security incidents, it's not necessarily a cyber incident. For example, if it's just an unsuccessful ping, but these are types of things that happen regularly, you might want to try to carve that out in the contract so you're not constantly providing notices of cyber incidents that they're not necessarily a cyber incident because there's not a breach. There's no unintentional disclosure because it's just a ping. They didn't actually view the information. They didn't get through. But it's helpful to have clear contract language to make sure that you're not overly reporting, or to know when you have to report, so you're not in breach of failing to report. So when must you file a report? Like I said, it's 72 hours once you determine that a cyber incident has affected the CDI or where the CDI resides. So that's also another thing that in the contract you want to make sure is what does determine or discovery mean, right? So within 72 hours of discovering or determining a cyber incident, does that mean it's the first time that you suspect a cyber incident, or is that after reasonable investigation, or is that when a reasonable person would have determined when that would have been? And so making sure there's clear guidelines as to when you determined a cyber incident would be helpful to know when you have to actually report, because it cannot be when you first suspect it, because if it's not actually a cyber incident, then you're just going to be either overly reporting, and then it's going to be burdensome on your company. So generally, you want to report all cyber incidents that result in significant loss of data, not just loss of data, but lack of access to your data. Like if they're holding your data hostage, system availability, control of systems. It impacts a large number of victims. And generally, I would think a large number of victims, that could be subjective based on your company, but I would keep that, if it's over 50, that would be something you definitely need to look into. Indicate unauthorized access to malicious software. If it's on a critical information system, you definitely want to report it because it could have impact other areas. And the thing is with reporting is the DoD, they're not there just to punish you for having a cyber incident that occurs, but they're also there to help you secure, if there's an incident, because it's important enough to them that their information stays secure. And so you want to report when there is a critical incident, because they can also help collaborate and help you figure out what's the best next steps, provide that support. So what do you submit to the DoD? So there's an incident collection form that there's the link right there, where you'll go on there and submit the information. And your subcontractors, like I said, it's a flow down. They must report directly to the DoD as well. So this is all the information that's found in the form. A lot of it's very typical. And then, more of the stuff that you want to look at is the type of compromise and the description of the technique or method. Sometimes, at the time of reporting, you may or may not know how it happened, just that it did happen. And so, if it's unknown, obviously you're going to have to indicate that, but hopefully you'll have done at least a little bit of investigation to determine, but 72 hours is a pretty short amount of time. So it might be difficult to determine that before you have to actually report. So what happens, after I submit this form, are they going to come knocking on my door? So basically the Cybercrime Center, they're going to process it. They're going to notify the COs. identified in the ICF. DoD will designate a damage assessment management office that's going to reach out to you to determine if they need to do a damage assessment, and if they need to do get additional information. So, I mean, basically, it's going to vary based on the type of incident. If you had a very significant incident, obviously, I would expect to have a damage assessment implemented by the DoD. If not, if it's more of a smaller incident, obviously, they may not think that it's necessary. So, the damage assessment will determine impact on U.S. military capabilities. And obviously, it depends on the type of product that you're providing and type of information you had. Consider how the compromised information could be used against the U.S. That's become a lot more relevant now with a lot of the hacks that have been going on from Russia. And they're going to focus on the data compromised rather than how it was compromised. So once you have submitted your reporting, there's other reporting obligations you might want to consider, depending on, one, in the contract, there might be other requirements. Two, the type of information that you have might be required to be reported to other entities. So just because you fulfilled the cyber incident reporting under DFARS, that doesn't mean you're off the hook necessarily. So it's something to remain cognizant about. I would definitely make sure you're looking over your contracts and flagging any sort of reporting requirements that are going to show up. And also, if you're dealing with financial information, or if there's personally identifiable information, there you might be subject to state law reporting requirements. So definitely understanding the type of information you're holding is very important to understand what kind of reporting obligations you have. It's not necessarily a good defense to say you didn't know. If you're working in that area, you should be aware of, especially because most of these solicitations and the contracts are going to have a catch-all of that you will comply with all state and federal laws applicable to you and your business. And so they're going to expect you to be aware of, yes, I'm subject to, say, California state law, privacy and data breach reporting obligations, and they'll expect you to comply with it if it's applicable to what type of data that you're storing. So, and like I mentioned, you want to be as collaborative as you can be, because one, they aren't there necessarily to shut your business down when an incident happens. It's very much in their interest to help you secure the information. But the other part of it is, if you've worked with the government and any sort of regulatory body, obviously, maintaining, your advice of counsel, you want to be as collaborative and appear as collaborative as possible, because that can also help you in the event there is some sort of corrective action plan that comes out. They're a bit more lenient when it was somebody that's, trying to do the right thing rather than someone that's trying to cover it up. So in addition to the reporting obligations, there's other things that come up. For example, preservation. Something like this happens, you want to make sure that you're able to investigate it after you report it. So 72 hours is a very short amount of time. And so you want to reach out to all your contractors, your subcontractors, whoever it is that maintains the system where that data that was compromised is at. You want to make sure you instruct them to not destroy anything for at least 90 days, so that they can, if they do require a damage assessment, that they can do that. Make sure that you have forensic experts, not necessarily on hand, but person that you can call in the event you do have a cybersecurity incident. I mean, I think one of the biggest things when you're talking about compliance is, you're going to have to invest money into a cybersecurity compliance, especially if you want to contract with the government, and having available, whether if you're a smaller business, knowing who you're going to call, if in the event something happens, and if you're a bigger business, you have them probably on staff, but cyber forensic experts that can help you conduct your investigation to determine where did this breach happen, and to the extent of it. I mean, that's a big part of the notification process after, although it's not usually done within 72 hours. So handling of malware, there's that other requirement that you submit it to the DoD Cybercrime Center. And that's just basically, you look it up, there's a link that you can submit the malware to. And also, like I mentioned in the contract, there's likely other confidentiality provisions that are in the contract that might create additional obligations. So you need to make sure that you look at those. In addition, whenever you are receiving or sending any sort of proprietary data, I would make sure that, it's marked. So, like, for example, when they're sending it to you, the type of data is categorized properly so that you guys can have it in your system, based on the appropriate controls. So obviously, if it's not confidential, it's not defense information, you're not going to have it subject to the most stringent controls. But then the data that is proprietary, that is defense information, you would. So in addition, to look at, not necessarily look out for, but the audit rights that come along with 7012 related to the cyber incident. There's media preservation and protection. We talked about the preservation rights, but it's also the media that may have been affected that you would need to preserve, but they have the rights to audit that, right? So they're going to require you to have access to any equipment or information that you have related to those audit rights. And then obviously they're probably going to need access to your system, your office, wherever the event took place to conduct their damage assessment. And then there's also, in the event it is related to a cloud service provider, if you use one and you don't house all the information, which typically nowadays it seems like everybody uses a CSP, you need to make sure that you require these requirements in your contract with your cloud service provider. Now, the larger cloud service providers are aware of government contracts like this. So for example, if you're using like AWS, Amazon, they likely have separate addendums that address this. You just need to ask because they want to have these big contracts. Now, the smaller cloud service providers, it may be more of a challenge and may take more explaining. But if that cloud service provider doesn't necessarily have a lot of government contracts, it may not be the one that you want to go with because they may not be aware or as willing to implement some of these requirements because they are much smaller. Okay. So that is inclusion of all my slides. The one thing that I did want to mention, which I didn't think I would have time to go into, was, you want to make sure that you are planning and taking the steps to invest in cybersecurity. I think now, especially, it's more relevant because of the fact of the risk of False Claims Act liability. So last fall, the DOJ had released new civil cyber fraud initiative, basically, to use the False Claims Act to initiate suits against federal contractors that are basically not meeting their regulatory and contractual cybersecurity obligations, which is very relevant. I mean, and the thing is, it applies to everyone, and it's not going to exclude you just because you're a smaller contractor. They identified 3 categories of conduct for FCA enforcement. Is basically you knowingly are providing deficient cybersecurity products or services, which if you are just if you're not providing cybersecurity products or services, that wouldn't apply. Knowingly misrepresenting cybersecurity practices and protocols. So basically, what the requirements are, which is you saw the bid, it's outlined the requirements, what they are, and you just didn't do them. You knowingly are failing to fulfill your obligations to report. So if you fail to report, a cyber incident and breach because you think, you know what, it's better to sweep it under the rug, and they find out about it, you could be subject to False Claims Act liability. And the one thing though is that, False Claims Act requires actual knowledge, reckless disregard, or deliberate ignorance of the truth. It's the one thing that the government is going to use though and say is that, you're aware because you responded to their solicitation and it was outlined in there. So it's going to be pretty hard to say that you didn't know of the cybersecurity requirements when you're performing a government contract. So it's just something that I just wanted to point out, and as an additional risk, as far as maintaining your compliance with, it's worth the investment to maintain your compliance.
Hey, Jen, we have a question from Steve Banks. Steve, do you want to turn on your microphone and ask your question of Jen?
Sure. So for protected images, so we support smaller subcontractors, and we're doing incremental backups of systems every 15 minutes, that type of thing. Would the images that are saved off site work for a covered, a protected image, so they could still be in business? We could correct the other incidents on site and keep the backups for review. Is that something that would be feasible, or do we just lock everything down? Because I mean, for a smaller site, they could really basically just freeze them up as far as trying to run things.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is whether, are you talking about in the event of a cyber incident?
Right. So if they were attacked and we have, quality images of everything that was attacked, like as the attack happened, could we keep those as evidence and fix their existing network, or we just like lock it all up and put them on something else diverse for the meantime?
Well, so I would
case by
say,
case.
I mean, the problem comes, which I understand the issue would be, we can't just leave it open like this, right?
Exactly.
Until whenever the DoD shows up and decides to come in. So I know dealing with a lot of data security breaches now, you basically need to be able to track exactly what happened. Having a forensic company come in and being able to have the photos, because that's what I've used in the past of, okay, this is the report of what happened. This is what in, what was what out, this is what was impacted. Because essentially that's what they're going to want to look at to do a damage assessment. Now, if you can accurately capture all of that information, that would be something. Now, I wouldn't say within 72 hours. It would be very difficult, I think, to do everything within 72 hours, but you can probably stop the breach without fixing it. But 90 days is a long time. So I would say that if you can have a detailed report that addresses all the information for what exactly I covered, talking about the damage assessment, then I would say that'd be okay. I just would be worried that, say, if you didn't do it, if you couldn't find the issue, that wouldn't be sufficient, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that makes total sense.
Yeah, it would have to be partially a judgment call, but if you have competent cyber, forensic IT people that can go in, identify the issue, and you have the screenshots of, okay, this is what happened, then I would say that'd be sufficient. Like, for example, I'm doing a data breach now. It's a state data breach, but that's what we've done is, working with a forensic company, and they've identified everything of what happened, because that's going to be the trail of basically what's impacted. Because the biggest thing that they're going to be worried about is there a continued breach? Is somebody still have our information? And what do they have? I mean, those are the two biggest issues, because if it's something that's defense information, they obviously want to get that back if they can, but they also don't want it to be continued to be out there and have access to everybody. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So Jen, one more question, and this is from me. Most of the members are smaller businesses, and having attorneys on retainer is probably not in the cards. When a breach happens, do you suggest, I mean, they get counsel involved?
So, like you said, if depending on how small they are, if you have a very large IT team so if you have a CISO on staff, basically somebody, a cyber security person that specializes in security incidents, and you might not need to contact an attorney right away because they likely know what's in place. Now, I want to take a step back. So before that, I would say that every single entity here should have some sort of a plan policy. This is going to be required anyway. You know, your incident, when an incident happens, what you're supposed to do, right? A roadmap. And that should outline what they should do in the event of a security incident to figure out, okay, what are my next steps? I do recommend having attorney involvement in the earlier stages, because it could be a lot cheaper than having them involved later. Now, my involvement when a data breach happens is more of, okay, what happened, what was impacted, and who do I have to report to? And it could be a very small engagement where we may not have to report it. We'll have a few meetings and do a little bit of analysis, and then that's it. But I think where you save money is by having an attorney involved earlier, is in that sense of, okay, this could be a very serious issue. And if you fail to take appropriate steps quickly, it might spiral into something worse. And so it's like cybersecurity compliance, like I've been saying, is you need to make the initial investment in the beginning to prevent the costs from mounting later, something more catastrophic from happening. And so if you have a good attorney that you can call in the beginning, they're not looking just to bill out their time just because, right? They're going to be looking at, like I said, for me, there's times when I've gotten on a call with somebody and said, this isn't something that you should be worried about at all. And then there's other times where they weren't worried, where I said, this is very serious. And it ends up being over 1,000 people impacted, and in a state data breach issue where they didn't even think it was. They thought it was a HIPAA breach. And so I do think that having a counsel that you can call and just at least talk through in the beginning as to, hey, what do you think? And how can I manage that? It could be a very inexpensive thing to do to prevent catastrophic damages later.
Very good. Carol, did you have a comment here? My partner at Impact Washington, Carol Bladen, or were you waiting to the end of the program? No. Okay.
Yeah, to the end.
Okay, very good. All right, well, let's move on to our panel. Jen, thank you so much. I think there was a ton of information in there. And for the audience, you are all going to get a copy of her slide deck. And again, on the Impact Washington YouTube site, once the recording is all the back end stuff that happens, you'll be able to access the recording there and the past recordings. That's a great site. If you don't subscribe to that YouTube channel, you probably should. There's a ton of information on Impact Washington's YouTube channel. But now let's move on to our illustrious panel. We have 4 panelists here. We have John Stevens from Luminant. We have James Wright from Executech. We have Jennifer Guerrero staying on as a panelist. And we have Jerry Leishman from the CORTAC group. And I'm going to start with you, Jerry. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell us who you are and what you do?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jerry Leishman. I'm with the CORTAC group. Been there about 3 years, and my whole focus has been on cybersecurity in the defense industrial base, specifically around CMMC. I've been on the CMMC AB board standards group and helped define some of the content and the approaches for industry to address the CMMC 1.0 model and now the 2.0 model. So I speak nationally about CMMC and locally here, and we have a lot of customers here in the Northwest that are trying to navigate their cybersecurity as well as their CMMC journey. And we provide kind of business advisory. We're kind of like the attorney that helps the CEOs and C-levels navigate their cybersecurity journey, and then provide them credible suppliers, managed service providers, cloud service providers, folks that have the right size, that are cost optimized solutions, and help the organization find the right path for them, because there's, as everybody knows, cybersecurity is pretty broad across people, process, technologies, physical and digital. There's no one size fits all from a product, service, or company. So it takes a village or an ecosystem to really be successful and navigate the journey for every individual company, because everybody's different. So I, that's what my role is. I'm in Redmond, Washington, and glad to be here today.
And we're glad to have you, Jerry. And next up, how about James Wright from Executech? Oh, we can't hear you. You got it? Nope. We'll let you get that figured out, James, but we'll move on to John Stevens right now from Luminant.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm John Stevens from Luminant, as Denise mentioned. Luminant is a cybersecurity provider that specializes in small to medium-sized businesses, helping those organizations without the big budgets and the know-how to work on their cybersecurity and their compliance. And we're kind of, our approach is like, we're all on this journey together. And so we'll be there with you in the trenches, trying to get everything working. We provide consulting and assessment services primarily. And so we like to work with the small businesses and try to get them to where they can meet those contract requirements.
Very good. And you work with all sizes of businesses. James, did you get your audio fixed?
Can you hear me now?
I sure can. Great.
Yeah, I told you that Zoom doesn't
Yeah.
like this headset for some reason.
He did warn us at the beginning.
It does it on every time I'm on a Zoom call. James Wright, I'm representing Executech. Executech is a managed service provider with offices in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, Seattle, Tri-Cities, Oregon. We provide full CSP suites from AWS, Microsoft. We are a company that works in the trenches, helping with folks with security, providing different range of solutions. We are a solution agnostic company, and we support all of them. Predominantly, we provide managed services, cloud services, and then our security services. So we're excited to be here to support you guys. We have tons of clients that are in the CMMC DoD space that we've been helping them navigate through these requirements, as well as a lot of other compliance standards, cities and towns, and we have a lot of different government-based relationships that we rely upon for supporting an incident response, as we provide incident response services as well. So happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you. Jen, do you want to give another, or, I mean, we pretty much know you.
It's fine, you guys. I think I've spoken a lot about myself already. So
yeah,
if anyone has any other questions, about my background, feel free to shoot me a message.
Yeah. Okay. The topic of this cybersecurity forum is a culture of compliance. So I would like to hear from our panelists one at a time. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you, a culture of compliance? We'll start again with you, Jerry.
Sure. So I look at it in two ways. One is what's when the auditor comes in and they're looking for institutionalization of people, process, and technology. What does that look like? So it's security by design, culture by design. That means your documentation reflects what your people are using and the tools they're using. So it all ties together in a clear fashion that auditors will look at and go, yep, said they're doing that. They are doing that. They're following the appropriate policies and procedures. That is really compliance and security by design based on that organization. So, but we all know that documentation is hard. People don't always read the documentation, understand it well. So it's hard to maintain that. So I think, with that desired outcome, there's a real change management effort and educational effort to really be successful So I think it's a huge lift. It's easy to buy a tool, but to change people's behavior for organizations of around 30, 40 years is hard. That's the hardest part, I think. Education and change management, process and people and tools are easy. So that to me means you have to look at it from an enterprise perspective, start from the top down to really build it in enterprise compliance, enterprise security, because the DoD, frankly, they're looking at you as a single entity. They're not just looking at you from one person or one process. They look at you as a trusted advisor, trusted supplier. So that's what a compliance culture means to me.
Very good.
It's fairly significant, and it really is a change in culture from what most organizations have today.
Very good. John, when you hear the term culture of compliance, what comes to your mind?
Well, I think that very much aligns with what Jerry just said. What I usually tell our clients is that we need to see alignment and consistency in the stack, where it's policy, procedure, and then practice. Those should all align and be accurate in practice. And the other point is it is a top-down situation. Management needs to lead in this example. They need to set the priority and the importance and criticality of security and compliance, and that needs to work throughout the organization. Specifically, I think it's a great time for leadership to lead by example. Yes, this is something that can be a little irksome and maybe not as convenient, but we all have to do it. So I think sharing the why is also helpful. But again, I go back to at the end, it's policy, procedure, practice, all aligned, working together. And I did like that, what Jerry said in regard to the compliance by design. I think that's a great way to state it. So I don't have much more to add than that, but I'll go on.
Very good. James, what does that term mean to you? Uh-oh, we lost you again. He did, to be fair, he did warn us that this was going to happen at the top, that sometimes this is a problem. Are you ready, James? Nope. Oh, we heard you.
You heard me that time?
Yeah, we heard you. Woo!
I don't know what it is. I always have to just reset the old terminology dongle for the headset. So, I'm going to build on, I think John made a really important statement. It's the why. When we think about cultures that are successful in compliance, every member of the staff know the why. What's the effect if we don't do this? Having staff buy-in and staff drinking the Kool-Aid, if that's the way you want to call it, and believing in compliance themselves, you can lead from the top down, you can do all of that, that's all great, but unless that individual user understands the importance of it, how it affects them as an individual, how it affects the business, how it affects the community that they serve, it's all futile, right? So having the staff really bought into the process, having the time to train them, having those why meetings is important, and how it affects them in their individual roles within the business units is, to me, something that's huge. Because like everybody has shared, compliance isn't fun. Documentation sucks. None of us like writing down notes if we don't like to, because we are a community that likes automation and technology. But if we're going to do this, we have to have those checks and balances to protect ourselves. So yeah, like Jerry and John, I probably can go on a tangent, but ultimately having that culture in your business that says we're doing this together is probably, to me, one of the most important parts of compliance and having the right culture around it.
How about you, Jen? Do you have anything to add to all of that?
Yeah, and so I definitely agree. I think the biggest thing is it's both. It's floated. The executives at the top need to be on board, because then the community, the employees, they won't buy in, because if they don't buy in, why do we have to buy in, right? And so I think that flow down, I used to always say, if the head of the snake isn't in, then it's going to be the rest of the organization is going to follow whatever they do. And so you have to have buy-in from the executives. You have to have buy-in from the staff, but how do you do that? And I think that's the biggest question that every organization faces, of how do I get buy-in from my employees? And we all know compliance isn't fun. It's usually more hated than the legal department in your organization, because they're the ones always going around to everybody saying, no, you have to do this. No, you have to do that. And when this happens, you have to tell us, because, you know, we control all of it. Now, I think changing the messaging of how compliance goes out is huge. I know in many of the organizations, I used to be in-house for 5 years, and how you do that is you present it as a partnership with the employees. I mean, you get everybody involved. As James mentioned, you give them the why. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why is this important for all of us to do? In addition to that, you try to make the training fun. I mean, if you can make light of some of it, do it. Because I know that sitting in a compliance training, learning about cybersecurity is only exciting for like this much of us, and the rest of everyone else goes to sleep. And so if you can make it a little bit fun, I would do that. I think training is very, very important. It's probably one of the more important things, because you have the policies, they're going to be there, but nobody knows what those policies mean or say. And so if you can get a training program, one that's dispersed regularly, not just once a year, because once a year, nobody's going to remember it. They're going to just do it because they have to do it. I think one thing that's really great is actually at our organization now, which we're a law firm, which I was shocked. We have cybersecurity training every month, takes about 5 to 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes 15. But it creates that awareness that, you know, I get an email from somebody. Do I just open it? Or should I check I don't know who they are. And a lot of times I'm a cybersecurity attorney, so I always check the email. But other people now, they're going to look and say, oh, this isn't a real person. I'm not really getting an email from my CEO. And creating that awareness, getting it embedded in the culture, I think is the most important thing. And you can only do that through sharing the information. And how do you share the information? You can't just tell them. It's a partnership. It has to be some sort of a training that goes out. So
Very good. Next question to you guys is a big one. Well, I think it is. It's regarding the alerts on Russia hacking. And did that change the cybersecurity staff training at all? The Russian hacking alerts. So we're going to start with James this time. So how's your audio? Nope. James. How about John? You want to get that while we get James all set up?
Sure. So in regard to the current situation with Russia and Ukraine, I think this has just brought more attention to the subject, but I don't think there's anybody who's been paying attention that doesn't believe Russia, as well as China, aren't hacking into supplier systems with an emphasis on the defense systems. So I think it gets us a little more visibility. And in fact, I also think that there's a greater likelihood that Russia is going to, escalate their efforts, simply because based on the news that I'm seeing, it looks like they're running into a lot of issues. They're not meeting their goals. And then they're also under enormous international pressure. And I feel like it's highly likely that they could kind of lash out at that. One of the things that we hear somewhat frequently is North Korea, how do they finance their operations? Well, there's some theft involved, according to a lot of people. They hack. Well, maybe Russia is going to take that same approach when they're locked off from the financial markets. But, it is a great case to further the rationale for cybersecurity and training in your organization. I mean, if you have an issue that's in the news that people can read about every time they go to the internet, and you can relate that to how that might affect their business, I think that's taking advantage of the opportunity. And I know that might sound a little crass, but it's out there, it's happening. And I think it's a good time to remind everyone that there are threats out there. This is relevant to the specific goings on, and build it in. As Jen said, cybersecurity training should be something that happens frequently, not just once a year. And I think that is another way to help embed that culture, is that you target your training based on current events. And so making it real to the people because it's something that they recognize. If I start going on and on about some obscure element of the tech stack, you're going to lose most of the audience. But if you've got a headline like that you can speak to and relate it to why it's important, I think that's a great thing to take advantage of, and it'll make it more relevant and meaningful to your staff.
Okay, James, you ready?
Is this better? You guys hear me okay? Thank goodness I actually have 3 different microphones I can switch to. So I switched to another microphone that might stay more real time. In agreement with John, I mean, the reality is the only thing that Russia and all these alerts have done is brought it more to the forefront in people's minds, and to this point where they can relate to it. And when they can relate to it, it actually opens them up to other channels of things that they may have not looked at previously as being important to track or monitor. For instance, like dark web monitoring. There are a lot of companies out there that may not be currently monitoring for credential use in the dark web. You know, they may not be looking at how easy it is to socially engineer credentials from your staff, or how they may socially engineer those credentials. Some of the incidents we've responded to, they've gotten extremely creative. To his point of theft, we've seen fraudulent credit card charges, fake bank access. We've seen all these different things that have occurred at a personal level, just so they can gain access to an environment. So yeah, these alerts have changed it, because for us, we're looking at it as, if there's a time to really look at your cybersecurity as a company, now's the time to take it more seriously than we've ever had. And in this community, it raises the bar further, because they want the data you have. They want the information you have, specifically to find vulnerabilities in a way that they can attack all of us. There was a comment that was made about hearing the kid in the background, because we're here to protect the future of our country, the future of our families. And we've seen a lot of different things that have been shared, including the threat of nuclear attack, right? We can't control that, but there are things we can control, which is how we protect and layer the controls and the individual solutions that we use that help us, give us as much information so that we can respond better. And we have to take those to heart. And we recognize that it's an investment. We recognize there's money attached to it. We recognize there's things we have to do we may not like to do, but to me, it raises the bar of what we need to be doing as individual businesses and as a cybersecurity community, in the importance of it.
Very good. Jen or Jerry, do you guys have a comment to add to that? Jerry?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in. So, it's interesting. We've been talking about cybersecurity in the defense industrial base for a long time. It's part of your DFARS flow down clause. It's not new information. NIST 800-171 has been the requirement for a long time for most that are carrying controlled and classified. So to us, it's really not as impactful. But I think I was at an event 2 weeks ago. It was an event down in Fort Lauderdale. It was called Missy Hack the Port. It was really interesting. What happened there is there's a guy named Armando Say, who is really trying to bring together education, government, and commercial to really energize a national focus on cybersecurity. And it happened to be during when Ukraine and Russia are at war right now. And what was really interesting is that I heard from Chris Inglis, who's cybersecurity at the White House, Jen Easterly from CISA, Diane Janicek from NSA, and then I can't remember his name, but running the DHS. So they're pretty significant players in the cybersecurity realm for this nation. And there's also education utilities there, or companies there. But what Inglis said that was really interesting to me, and most important for us as a nation, not just individuals who are a part of that, but is that Chris said this is the first time he's seen government, industry, education coming together for a common theme. And he said the last time this happened was in 1913 with the Spanish flu, when I think millions of people died. Everybody came together to really figure this out and protect our civilization as we know it. They're saying that this is actually happening, and I observed it in the commonality in their speaking, that these government agencies were speaking, and the collaboration and the consistency. And one interesting thing is it was a lot of those were led by women. right? And I found out NSA has 55% of their staff, or excuse me, CISA, or no, it's NSA, 55% of their women are leading the cybersecurity charge. So I just make that point. It's just fantastic. So women in cybersecurity is really a significant influencer in this industry. But having said that, that was what the real change was for me, is that the government, private sector, and educations are all working together now to prevent cybersecurity and protect the national security of this country, which is it's pretty significant to think about that. The other thing that happens that I'm seeing, and Rick Rosenberg is on the call here, is that from a smaller supplier like ourselves, the result of the higher cybersecurity risk is resulting in other aspects that we need to be aware of. Obviously, we've got the regulatory requirements for DFARS flowdowns, but I mean, all of us are thinking about, man, maybe I can get some cyber insurance to protect me. Well, Rick will tell you, hey, it's getting expensive and the coverage is getting small, and you can get reduced premiums if you demonstrate to your cybersecurity due care and diligence. So cybersecurity is paying back. And that makes a lot of sense if you can get it. So that's one thing that affects all of us. But the more interesting thing that Rick and I were talking about is there are a lot of financial institutions that are giving loans to small business associations. They're starting to require cybersecurity disclosures, because to them, it's a risk. When you deliver funding to an organization that's going to get hacked and go out of business in a year after they get hacked, that's a high risk. So they want some disclosures and some mitigations. So that's where I see it really affecting all of us, is that cyber is a part of doing business, and it's increasing in its impacts on us, from regulations to finance to insurance. And that's just, and then the criminal ransomware, your business operations, nation state helping protect the country, and disruption. The other thing that was really talked about was, how does the adversary disrupt us? They may not want our IP, or they may not want to or get money for us. We're not criminals. They want to disrupt us. And this is really where critical infrastructure comes into play. 80% of the country is owned by private companies around critical infrastructure. So the government really has to work with the critical infrastructure to really protect us, utilities, so forth and so on. So that's the bigger picture that I see that affects all of us as a nation. So it's my 2 cents.
Jen, I saw you had your hand up, but you took it down. Do you have a thought, or?
No, I think that they pretty much covered it. I think it's just generally, there's just more of a heightened awareness. And I agree with what John said, is that right now is an opportunity to really have the discussion. It makes it a lot easier when talking with clients about, hey, you have to think about this risk. Whereas, a few years ago, trying to have this conversation with clients, it's a lot more difficult of, why do I have to get cybersecurity insurance? Why do I have to do all this stuff? What's the real risk of a breach? Like, come on. Why do I have to spend this much money to put policies and procedures in place? And why do I have to do a data mapping? I mean, is this really necessary? And so I think it just makes it easier for us to do our job. I mean, that's been a benefit for us, I guess.
Okay, and I'll just open this up to the group. Are there any ideas that you have to make cybersecurity fun and engaging for staff at all levels?
So
James?
I'll tell you that some of our clients, you remember those old signs you would see in warehouses that said there were no workplace instances in so many days? You guys remember those? And they would do reward systems around that. We are actually seeing some of our clients institute that for cybersecurity incidents. If we can go a full year of no cybersecurity incidents that have to be reported, maybe we'll do X or we'll do Y. Because that's part of what they get out of it. That's something tangible. Everybody loves swag. So I've seen them use swag. I've seen them do parties. I've seen them do different things throughout the month to really, again, tie back to what Jen was talking about. Her office is doing is monthly sessions of 10 to 15 minutes of talking about it, but rewarding your staff with it and helping them beyond the training. The reality is we can buy cyber insurance. We can have controls in place that will reduce the cyber insurance cost. Back again, one of the other questions you'll probably ask, if our community, our staff, our employees, whether they're working in an office or work from home, if they're not bought in and they're not feeling a part of that push and feeling rewards, they'll become disinterested.
Very good. John, you must have something.
Sure. And I think James had it very correct with regard to what we see have a lot of success is gamification. For example, fish your employees, let them know you're going to fish them. And the emphasis should be on the folks who don't click versus emphasizing those who do. And, keep score. Who's gone the most phishing campaigns without being caught? That type of thing. I love the idea of the X number of days since a cyber incident. The other thing that I think is going to make it more interesting is, like we talked about, making it relevant. Nobody wants to hear a cybersecurity trainer, blather on for days about very technical or very dry material. Rather than that, make it relevant to the audience. And I think that's a key piece with the education. One of the things that we do is we partner with a firm. When we send our cyber education, it's done monthly, and it's 3 to 5 minutes. So it's a palatable chunk that they can read and retain, because it's not 45 minutes of somebody just droning on. It breaks it up, makes it palatable. They say, how do you eat an elephant in bite-sized chunks? I think that's another way to take care of that.
Okay. I'm gonna keep it to the panel, but at the end, I do want to hear from some of our members or our participants that have ideas in this. I think that sounds fun. The next question I have is I've heard of this human firewall, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that means in the space of a company. And again, let me open it up. I don't know who wants to start, but
Jen raised her hand.
James.
Oh, so when you think about human firewall, right? We all have bad tendencies that we like to fight. But as we train and as we become more aware, and as we do these phishing campaigns and we get results from dark web scans and we see the change audits and all these things coming in that lead to these trainings, we're our best defense as individuals. Looking at, to the point of Jen, at an email, having the right technology that's going to help alert us to different things. But at the end of the day, we're the best defense. Thinking about it before we do, right? Slowing down what we're doing in the day-to-day processes to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, knowing that it could lead to, an adverse reaction or series of events that could lead to cyber insurance costs going up because they've had to pay out a few times. So that human firewall, or us, becomes the number one thing that we can do to help reduce the likelihood of an incident. And using our credentials only in places related to work and not related to dating sites or these other places that could lead to a breach on our environment. So to me, that's the biggest thing about being a human firewall, is us slowing down and actually using our mind as we're transacting our individual duties within a company.
Yeah, and I think what's important about this, and I kind of mentioned it when I was talking about the training, is the way that to get it to work is to have it such a regular conversation that it comes up naturally in your mind for the employees, because the human it's not going to work if they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And so having that culture of compliance embedded into the organization, that it's a regular, like I said, 5 to 15 minute conversation. When I get up from my computer, do I lock it? Like just regular things. Now that's not dealing with hacking, but that's physical security requirements. And just having it so it's so natural that you don't think about it is what's really going to help enforce the human firewall. Because most of the time, what I've been seeing a lot more is these phishing attacks is they are getting so much more sophisticated that it's really sometimes hard to see, I thought that really was, Apple trying to get me to resend my information in. And then these emails, they look so real which obviously they've had to get more sophisticated because we've caught on, right? And so just kind of having the training and having it such a regular conversation in the organization for people to flag it on their own is going to be the biggest offense that you have, because you can have the best security and you can have cybersecurity insurance, but a lot of times with the breaches I've seen too, it's based on an employee. An employee did something, whether it was a bad actor employee or it was an accident. Most of the breaches that I see, it's because something happened with an employee. So.
Okay. John, you had a comment.
Sure. Just a brief comment. One of the things that we see, because our firm does penetration testing, where we are hired to hack into the firm, and we use things like social engineering. One of the things that makes it really challenging is we send a phish, and everybody is familiar with the phrase, the weakest link in the chain, and it's usually followed by, and that's you, right? You're saying that the people are the weakest link in the chain. But in fact, if you've got the human firewall in place, you've got folks that are very savvy about it. Sometimes, just like a firewall, they will stop that threat from affecting everybody else. Maybe it's somebody who's in early, they see the phish, they tell IT about it, or they send out a blast to the entire organization, hey, don't touch this. Instead of going from, hey, I'm worried about my weakest link, to I've got somebody who's actively supporting the organization and helping out those that aren't as well-trained or knowledgeable. So I think it's a big deal, and you don't usually get that unless you do get that culture of compliance and security.
Very good. John raised his, Jerry, we already went through everybody. Sorry about that. Give me the biggest 2 do's and 2 don'ts when creating a cybersecurity policy for small and medium-sized business. What's the biggest 2 do as you're designing your program for your firm, and the biggest 2 don't do? Don't do. I don't know. That might have been a double negative, but either way, Jerry, why don't you take that for us?
Yeah, no, for sure. Depending on how much you've already invested, it will tell you your maturity and how much further you need to go. So that's the first step. You have to kind of know where you're at, so you can make informed decisions on where you want to go. And NIST 800-171 is kind of the baseline that you'll want to shoot for. That's what CMMC 2.0 is going to be based on. It's what DFARS is based on today, plus the incident response that Jen shared with us. So that you've got everything there that you need. So and then the second part is wow, I got a long ways to go once you know that. But to make an informed business decision, you really have to look at risk, right? You want to go with the high risk areas first, and those are the 3 or 4 would be phishing training, right? The human wall. You got to get your people up to speed. The second one is multi-factor authentication. Just make it hard. If one password gets hacked, they still have to have a second to get in. And you might hear about zero trust environments. It's kind of about trust but verify. So that's the second one. Third is have reliable backups that you've proven that you can restore. So if you are disrupted, that you can restore without having to pay ransomware and have business downtime. And I think those are the top 3 that you should have to take as job number 1. The rest, you're going to need to look at where you're at, and there's a lot to work through. But those would be my first recommendations to kind of move forward in terms of your journey.
Very good. Anyone else want to add to the big 2 do's and 2 don'ts?
Yeah, I will. I think on the don't list that I would add is, don't ever assume that the solution you have in place is the correct solution just to check the box. When you have an ever-changing cybersecurity environment, solutions change. Some mature faster than others. You may start years ago on one AV solution and you're like, well, I've got AV. Well, now there's solutions with anti-ransomware. Okay, well, now I have anti-ransomware. Well, we've learned recently that that's not enough. We need XDR watching the lateral movement in the environment, not just antivirus and anti-ransomware. So don't ever feel that you're in a place that I've got that covered. Always look at your solutions that are in place, to Jerry's point, and realize the do is it's a layered approach. It's having the right gateway security. It's having the ability to send encrypted emails. It's having the disk encryption. It's having those other solutions that are going to protect you firewall, VPNs. We can go on and on about it. Having change auditors to know who's getting elevated permissions, maybe considering locking down certain IT tools other than when they're in use, like PowerShell, because that's an attack vector, right? We have to be able to dig really deep into the weeds, and understanding that, you know, phishing is one of the ways that, but they are now doing vishing, where they're doing voice calls, socially engineering attacks, and that they're going to work months to get into your environment. Then they're going to get into your environment and they're going to sit there for months and explore. So don't ever assume is probably the biggest don't. And the do's is always be proactive, investigating, is this the right solution? And auditing that on a regular basis to make sure you make good decisions as a business owner.
Yeah.
John, it looked like you wanted to jump in there a little bit.
I think James really hit the nail on the head. Don't assume. And I would similarly say that's true for assuming that your solution works. But I'd also put it out there that you can't. It's imperative to think it's a one and done. It's a constant journey. It's an evolution over time, as James alluded to. And so the other don't I would say is just don't take the marketing words to heart when you're talking about solutions. James referenced antivirus and anti-ransomware and then XDR. There's all of these different labels out there. Don't think that you can just buy a tool and be done. It's a holistic effort. So it's critical that you do try to approach it from the culture of compliance and security versus I'm going to buy a tool and then I'm done.
Okay. Very good.
Denise, I just want
Gary?
to add to that. So what James and John were just saying is one of the other main investment areas is your monitoring. Have a managed service provider or somebody take aggregation of all the different end user protections and activities. Have somebody looking at that, because nobody has time and there's a lot of content that's going through your systems. So a fourth investment area to have a good monitoring system or a service provider, keeping an eye out for you.
Very good. Okay, I do want to open it up to the rest of you because I want to roll back to that. What are you doing to make cybersecurity fun piece? So if you could just, I think there's a way to sort of raise your hand or something like that, but I'll start with you, Rick. You had your hand raised before. Just to briefly, what would you do to make cybersecurity fun for your employees?
So touching on what James said, in construction and in manufacturing, they've been working on a culture of safety for a very long time. And usually the best ideas come from taking an established idea somewhere and then changing it. So speaking with your safety professionals and with other industry safety and seeing, hey, what programs got good interaction? What programs didn't? How are you able to get your employees to understand physical safety in the workplace, and taking those, what works and what doesn't, and applying that to your cybersecurity, because it's the same culture of safety. It's just in a different realm.
Okay, Tariq, I think you had your hand up earlier too.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Real quick, one of the things that we do is we created a deck of cards. We worked quite a bit in the HIPAA compliance. Now we're developing something within the CMMC with a deck of cards. And during our monthly lunch and learn, we just have people pick out cards and just talk about the topic, literally for less than 5 minutes. What is the topic? And in CMMC, we're focused more on the CUI and all the different domains. On the HIPAA compliance was more on the PI. So we have a deck of cards that we created and we're constantly refining it. So we have 52 weeks of training with 52 cards, essentially, is how we try to make it fun. And it depends on whatever they pick. And we have a literally 5-minute discussion and that's it. And we'll move forward with whatever else they have on the agenda.
Okay, does anyone else have a fun idea? I would say there are no bad ideas, but I'm thinking of one that I'm pretty sure you guys are going to think is horrible. But does anybody else in the group have a horrible idea? Okay, Well, we're about to wrap up, but before I do that, I want to point out my friend Dale King from PNAA is in the room. They're always an added. He represents the Aerospace Alliance. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Dale will let you know how to get a hold of him. They're working on a nice grant. The other thing I want to point out is my colleagues, but well, he's not my colleague, he's my boss. So my boss, Bud Blake, is on the call, and it's bud@pndc.us. If you ever want to get a hold of him, he's ready to meet you. Carol is, of course, here from Impact Washington, but one of their account representatives, at least one, Nick, is here from Impact Washington. They're there to help your manufacturing floor run better and create all sorts of efficiencies. And I would encourage you to reach out to Nick. And I don't think talking to him he charges for that. So that would be a good opportunity to reach out for him and see if maybe they can help you out a little bit with your manufacturing floor. And then last but not least for me, and I'm going to hand it over to Carol, Bailey Simpson is on the back call. She hardly ever says anything, but let me just tell you, we could not run these programs without her running them in the background. So please, if you ever see Bailey, or if you get a chance to email her, thank her for all of us, because she does a great job back there. Carol, you had some things you wanted to add.
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you to everyone that joined us today. Thanks for all the panelists. This was a really interesting and enlightening conversation. And you're absolutely right, Jen. I have to really pay attention to those emails that come across, because they're getting really, really, really good, especially on the personal side. When they come into my email from Apple, I always got to look at that email address. I just wanted to share a couple opportunities with the group. The National Institute of Standards and Technologies, NIST, which Impact Washington is part of the NIST MEP network, wants your input to improve the effectiveness of cybersecurity framework and its alignment with other resources. They are also requesting suggestions to inform cybersecurity guidance related to supply chain risks. They're looking to better understand the opportunities for greater alignment and harmonization of the framework with other resources. This will help NIST provide more effective support to organizations as they manage the different types of cybersecurity risks. So I have a link I'm going to put in the chats for everyone to provide this information back to NIST. It looks like they are requesting information by 4/25. I will also suggest to you to follow the Impact Washington LinkedIn page. This is often where we share a lot of this information that's coming from NIST and things that we're working on. But this is a really great opportunity, I think, to provide some feedback directly to NIST on the cybersecurity framework. The second thing, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick. It looks like he's back on the call with us, which is great. Nick's got an opportunity that he's going to share. And while he's talking about it, I will put a link in the chat with regards to how to get a hold of Nick and a one sheet to what he's going to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Hi, guys. A lot of times, one of the first roadblocks we've run into is cost with cybersecurity and NIST implementations. So we've worked with the state on a grant. It's kind of a training grant for NIST 800-171 level 2 implementation. And really based on wage match, the JSP program. It's a classic kind of training grant the state's been running for a long time for companies. And so we're recruiting companies to kind of join a cohort of people interested in going all the way to level 2. And they would need 2 people per company to kind of make the wage match work. And about 2/3 of the training would be in a consortium format, covering all of the controls that would be something you could do in a classroom. And then the other third is one-on-one direct time with the company or manufacturer. So I'm looking to get 5 of those companies to commit. We've got a pretty tight timeline. May 1st is when they want a letter of commitment. So if you know anybody in your network that might be helpful there, or if there are any manufacturers in the call, I don't see a ton of names, I don't think, that are manufacturers, but give us a shout.
Very good. And you said that's a grant?
It's a grant program. The state requests for all the JSPs, they request a little bit of skin in the game for the manufacturers. So I think per company, it's about 2,500 to 5K, but really 60, 70, 80K of value probably consulting hours wise. The investment from the company's standpoint is the wages. So, the fully burdened rate of those people that are being trained times the hour they're there. That's the company's investment rather than cash.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds awesome. Was that it, Carol? Did you have, I don't want to cut you off.
Yep, no, that's just it. Again, I put the link to the information that NIST is looking for in the chat, and information around the program that Nick was talking about. You can reach out to him directly or myself if you have any questions on that. And again, please share that link for the NIST information out to any of your peers or partners. I think, again, it's a great way that they're requesting information directly from everyone on the call today. So thank you for joining us. And thanks, Denise. Great job today.
Yeah, and Carol are you sending that to Bailey? That seems like a good thing to put in our newsletter if you have another.
Yep, I'll absolutely do that.
Things going that. Before I sign up, I think, Dale, you have an event coming up tomorrow. Do you want to talk about that just really briefly?
Sure. Actually, we have it coming up in about an hour and a half.
Oh,
We have our webinar, and it's our International Day, and Baker Hotstatler will be our main speaker, talking about CFIUS and sanctions and things that are going on in international business and how it's going to be affecting our supply chain, aerospace supply chain. And then, at the beginning of it, we're really spending some time talking about Farnborough, how to get set up to go to Farnborough this year, if anybody is interested in that. And then we have a whole list of partners that are going to be there talking about different events that they have coming up. So it's really kind of an international partners day.
very good. All
Thank
right.
you, Denise.
Yeah, anytime. In saying that, I want to thank our panelists, Jerry. We have all J's today. Jerry, John, James, and Jen. So that's kind of cool. I think you guys did a great job. Thanks for bearing with me. This is my first time moderating this panel. Our person is actually in Orlando right now, and I'm not feeling too bad for her as I did this. Hope it was okay. And we will continue to host these. I believe the next one is early in May, and get signed up. We still have tons of people signing up for these. So as that happens, our partner Impact Washington and PNDC will continue to do them. I want everybody to go out and make it a great day. And I'm leaving you from National Harbor, where I'm going to go have lunch. So thanks a lot, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye.